And that was a lot of money. I know people, millenniums and people probably between anything under like 50 years old can't relate to that. My son's like, wow, he can't believe we work for that low amount of money. But when I was offered a job in the casino in Atlantic City at $5.25 an hour, I thought that had met my entire life's goal, which was to make $10,000 a year. That's what back in the 70s. That's what we aspired to do, make two digits, which was just $10,000 a year. So I get this job. I'm excited. I love it. The first year in, they tell us that they're going to get rid of our department, which was data entry, and they were going to put terminals inside, not PCs, but terminals inside all the different departments. And they let everybody go in our department except me. And the reason why they kept me is because I had put together a procedure manual because we had to do payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable. Data entry involved every aspect of running the business. And you had to input into a computer all the different detail. And so I had written down a number of procedures so that I could remember. And when the boss found out that I had that, and when he went to the technology director, went to sell to the other departments that this is where we're going with each individual department doing their own data input, he used my training guide and gave everybody a copy of it so that for their respective departments so that they could actually enter the information in as well themselves. And from that, they made me I wasn't a supervisor in name and title, but I was in charge of all of the documentation that came along with that. And I coasted, for about a year or two, setting that all up and making sure all the departments met their goals. And I was fine with that. I had an immediate boss, and I learned so much from her. And she went out on maternity leave, and then I took her spot. And at this point, I am thrust into being a boss. And I was a micromanaging boss because I had done my own work for all those years and I didn't trust anyone to do it as good as I did. And yet I had hired these people because the department actually grew and I had to hire people to replace me. And obviously I replaced her. So a guy, I'll never forget him. His name was Pete. He said to me, he said, Trina, he said, the one resource that you need to learn in being a boss. And he said, you are a true leader, but you have to understand how to delegate and you have to trust the people that you delegate to. And when I learned that lesson, the stress went away because I was always stressing about if the person was going to do. I was really one of those people that would go check your work every day. Not even if it was a week project, I would check it every day to see if you're progressing as far as you should be in that day. And when he told me that, it just clicked. It made sense. So at that point, I decided that I was going to not only be a good boss and trust the people that work for me, but also develop different processes that would allow them to do their job easier and more effectively. Not realizing that I was going from a boss to a leader, transitioning, and I didn't recognize it. However, fast forward a couple of years later, um, the PCs come on board, and I had a boss that decided that because I did so well in that department that it was going to be my responsibility to implement the PCs going from the terminals and typewriters as well into the personal computer world. And I did that and it worked. Everything was working good. I was never paid what I wanted to or I felt I was worth, but I also got a lot of different perks and it just kind of satisfied me and I wanted to grow because I think education and opportunity is worth more than money. And so I stayed there a few more years and I developed training programs that ended up getting out to all the other departments like security, housekeeping, the cafeteria. All of these department heads wanted to take my classes that I had developed for the administrative offices. And when my boss saw that I got to be too popular, she took me off it. And so that's when T-Bird Personal Computers was born. I was like, I didn't work this hard, get all this recognition to just have one person decide my fate. So from that minute forward, I decided that not only was I going to start my own company, but I was going to give it a year to pay off any debt that I had, build my portfolio in terms of finding a location, doing everything I needed to know about going from corporate America to entrepreneurship. And so I did that, and I had to succeed because the license that I had to work in the casino was a $500 license. Back then, it was a lot of money. And if you didn't renew it, you would have to start all over. So when I decided that I wasn't going to renew that, I just stepped out on my own faith in myself and, of course, God, and said, I just am going to look forward. And I started my own company. At that point, I had learned so much about working in the casino industry, being a boss, being a leader, that I didn't have a hard time transitioning over to a leadership role and driving the company forward in terms of my employees, my students, support staff, everybody, including several family members. But yet, I did not have, and people won't believe this. I think who was it? I think Pam or one of the other ladies from the other class. She won't believe this, but I had trouble firing people. I literally could not say you were fired to people. I would have my mom come in or my husband come in, and they would take them, quietly and say, look, blah, blah, blah. I could write it out, but I couldn't say it. And so one of my colleagues, she told me, she said, Trina, you are great at being a boss and a leader, but you have to interconnect everything. You cannot be afraid to hire and fire people. You can't be afraid to direct them in the way that they need to be directed, because if you don't tell them what they're doing wrong, then you get to the point where you're ready to fire them. It's not fair to them that they don't understand that path to termination as well as the path to maybe a promotion. And she sat with me and we developed a policy and a procedure manual, and that's how I learned how to progress with being a boss as well as a leader, so that you not only show people how and where to get to where you need them to be in your company, but you also make sure that they understand that you have boss capabilities as well. And so here we are, 20, maybe 30, what is that? 2000, I think I started in a storefront because I was a home-based business for a minute. And then when I became a storefront, I think it was 2000, maybe it was 20, 30 years. I have no idea. When you get older, you just you've been doing it for a long time, maybe 30 years. But I fast forward, and now I'm actually teaching people as a business consultant how to progress into that leadership role equally as you do in being a boss. And so I find myself sometimes resorting back to my story and telling people how I actually reacted to certain situations. What happened?
Oh, no idea. It's connecting again. Oh man.
And as most of you know me, I'm always going to do something different than the norm. And so in this presentation, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I want to talk about how you integrate the boss and the leadership skills to make that, I won't call anything perfect, but how you make for a better situation, regardless of whether you are in a leadership role or a boss role. Because sometimes you can't even, you don't have a choice in the matter. You guys see my screen? Not yet. Let's see if it's working. Hope I didn't have to reboot, so let me stop it and share again. There we go. All right, let me just get a slideshow. Individual, yeah, that's what I want. Okay, you see a full screen? Let me see if Rick, you got me, Rick? You see the full screen? You guys see the full screen? There we go.
It's taking a little while.
All right. You guys see it? Okay, good. Okay, so typically you're asked whether or not you are a boss or a leader. And so my presentation tonight is going to talk about the good points of being, well, actually, I'm going to do leader this week, and next week I'm going to do boss. And then we're going to next week integrate the good points about being a boss into the great points about being a leader. And in between that, I have a homework assignment for everyone. So I'm going to put in the chat. I'll just kind of skip to the end for a minute. And this website here, Jack Canfield, he has a whole series, books, podcasts, everything on being a leader, in terms of leadership, being a boss, all of that. So I'm going to put the link in the chat box so that everyone can take the 60-second quiz for free. So when we come back next week, you'll be able, we'll have a discussion about, once I do the presentation on the boss points, the positive boss points, you'll have your report, which is going to look like this. It'll tell you after you answer the questions whether you're a leader or a boss. And then it gives you kind of tips on everything about being a leader and a boss, which is a cool site. It's all free. Okay. All right. So what it means to be a boss. Being a boss means that you're in charge of a team or the whole organization. A boss is supposed to assign tasks, have control over employees, and make crucial decisions. Everybody pretty much knows that, and they're fine with that. But also people who tend to be a boss sometimes will let that whole concept go to their head. Give me 1 minute. My grandson is in there. His stuff just came back too. Shut your door, Rico. Rick, can you take care of that, please? Okay. What it means to be a leader. Being a leader means that you are also in charge of a team or the whole organization, and your main purpose is to lead the team by being able to influence and inspire, to work towards making the company vision become a reality while putting people first. So for me, and when I teach this course, that's the concept that I try to deliver in terms of being a leader. But I also try to deliver that message of being a boss, because you have to do both. If you're a strong leader, but people don't follow or they don't implement the leadership that you actually present for them, then it doesn't work. The same way it won't work if you're a boss that, all you do is punch people down and expect them to come back with great results every single time that you are actually hollering and screaming at them. I had one of my clients just recently. She was a medical biller. She's does ABA services, and she hired a medical biller. And this lady had about 25 years of medical billing in her industry. She had a lot of experience, but she was a slow-paced person. And my client would go in there and scream and yell at her, thinking that the tone of her voice would motivate her in getting it done. And then she would throw some underlining threats kind of in there that you'll never get more than 20 hours if you don't get this done, that done. And so she just walked out one day about 3 weeks ago. And then that same crazy person had the nerve to call her back and wanted to know if she would be the receptionist. And she turned her down flatly, like, no, I'm not used to being, I have a slower pace, but my pace is accurate. So therefore, in medical billing and coding, that's how doctors get paid. So you have to make sure that that accuracy is there. So you may want to take your time to take some extra time, hour or so to make sure that the billing is correctly so that the person gets paid. And she refused to come back. So what I want to do is show you how, in that example, how instead of yelling and changing your body demeanor and your verbal demeanor, trying to motivate this person to do a quicker, better job, the different way that you can actually get the person to do the same exact thing that you want, but the way that you approach them in a leadership capacity, which is to teach them how to do it quicker. Like come up with some ideas where you can get it done and how you can self-check yourself. And once you check it off that list, then you know you can go to step 2. And because you checked it off, that means that you actually went back and ensured that all those things that had to be done for step 1 were actually successfully completed. And now you move on to step 2. So those are the kind of things that I'll be talking about next week when we compare the two. So let's get started. Let's evaluate some of the attributes of a leader. Leaders are compassionate, whereas a boss is impersonal. Sometimes they want to use the tone and the body language that really is not acceptable to your most sane person who is just there to do a good job. You have so many people that just want to get up and come to work every day and do a good job, but they're not motivated if their boss is impersonal towards them. If you're compassionate towards that person, then guess what? You'll get better results. I was told back in my early career at the casino, you get more bees with honey than vinegar. And for the life of me, when I was told that, I didn't know what they were talking about. It didn't click. And when it finally did click, I was really great friends with the office coordinator who was out front in the MIS department where all the action took place. And for years, I had the intel of what was going on with everything. She and I had a little dispute and we stopped talking to each other. I think I was like in my late 20s. And I'm going to be strong. I'm not talking to you. Whatever you did to me, I don't even know now. I'm just not going to talk to you. And then she was strong. But the person that got hurt the most was me because I was never not in the loop anymore. I didn't know what was going on in the office, whereas before I had the inside scoop on almost everything because she trusted me to tell me things that she wasn't supposed to tell me. And because she did, I had the insight. And of course, I kept my mouth shut. So that relationship was always going to be beneficial to me. And I think I screwed it up because if I had overlooked whatever it is that we had to dispute about, I would have still been connected. I learned so much from that mistake that I never break my bridges wherever I go. Even if I know I'm 1,000% right, I never burn those bridges because you never know when you're going to see that person in a different capacity. And all they're going to do is remember how their last experience was with you. And that is a good sign of a strong leader, especially in today's world. You might see them on a Zoom call and they're a student just like you. And yet they may have a comment that may be good for you or bad for you. So you just never know. Number 2, leaders are inclusive, whereas bosses will say I and leaders will say we. I always teach my students to always, even when you're writing correspondence, to always say we or the team. I like saying the team because then you refer to, well, first of all, if it's only 2 of you, you seem bigger than you are. And if you say we, it's still positive, but the team means that you've got more people working towards their common goal for the client or for, your boss. That tells the boss or the client that you are a team player just by saying the team did this, the team did that, instead of saying I. And I wanted to ask a question, which I skipped over. Why do you think bosses are more impersonal than compassionate? Anyone want to answer that? I'll call you out. You know that, Pam. I know. Why do you think, Pam? And leaders tend to think about the end game more so than the immediate response. A leader doesn't really get reward immediately, whereas a boss wants reward immediately. They want to feel empowered. They want to feel like they did their job really quick and got quick results. Would you agree? Okay. Um, the team. What do you guys think about the team versus we? Michelle? I saw you. I saw you. You sound like a person that would say the team. That's why I called you because you know the couple of months that I've known you, you are a we and the team kind of person. Do you prefer team versus we? Do you prefer the word team? Yeah, definitely. I'm the oldest of four, so we would get in trouble if we said I. We would be, I would be, or whoever said I, that's who would get the trouble. So it was always a we team. All right. Leaders don't micromanage. Remember, I told you the story about me micromanaging? I had to, that was a hard lesson to learn. And I didn't understand in the beginning that it was a trust issue. I thought, I mean, I liked the people that I had hired to work for me. I just felt like I had to show them every little step in order for them to get it right. And I never considered that maybe my 3 steps could be done in 2 steps or 1 step because that person saw a quicker, better way to do it. And I didn't, I wasn't mature, I don't think. I know, because I was manager like I was 28 or 29, something like that. Um, yeah, something like that, 28 or 29. And I don't think that I was mature enough to understand, even though I was a new mother at that time, I wasn't, I was in that motherly mode where I had to show my son every little step. So I kind of took that mindset with the staff that I had because it was my real first time being a manager. And like, let me show you. Whereas you got to let people show you as well so that not only can you learn from them, they can learn from you as the leader. And I told you about my good friend Pete. He told me delegate, Trina. That's the first of all, you become a real leader when you let other people do the work, and then you just check it to make sure that not only do they do it correctly, but you can also enhance what they're doing. You can give them tips. You can show them if there's a better way to do it, or expand what they've already done and build on top of the success that they already have. But let them be successful first. Don't try to go in and deliver that success, because then it becomes your success and not their success. And when people work for you and they want you to be their leader, they want to show you how successful they can be, opposed to you showing them what that success should look like. That makes sense to everybody? Oh, sure. Let me pull up my chat so I don't miss those. Micromanage. I'll give you a good example. Um, Let me get that out the way too. Micromanage is like I was. You give the person a task list, um, and then you stand over them to make sure that they get it done. Or every 15, 20 minutes, you're checking. Well, give me an update. Give me a response. Let me check your work. Show me what you've done so far. Show me what your deliverables are. You don't give them a chance to put together the entire package. So for example, if you're having a employee put together an event and they have to invite like all the supervisors and the management team for the actual company, and the company is over 2 states, 3 locations. And so rather than micromanage and make sure that everyone has been contacted, everyone has been notified, they received all the literature and everything that's associated with them, instead of micromanaging them on a daily basis, you may ask for a quarterly report. I'm sorry, a weekly report opposed to a daily report or reporting in 2 or 3 times a day. And what I like to do with my staff, or my used to be staff, because I just use 1099s now. But when I have my employees, I'm a big person on checklists. So the way I channel my micromanagement is to provide a checklist of everything I needed to get done for a particular project and just give them the checklist. How could you go wrong with a checklist? You're telling them everything that you want them to do. They are checking it off as they do it. I always ask for a completion date. never an estimated, just a completion date of when you complete it, so there's no pressure. Give them a due date, but make sure the due date is enough time for them to do it, plus a few days, or maybe even a week. And so that's how I channel my micromanaging skills into checklists. When you delegate, you can also use that that checklist process. But what you do in that particular point is you give them inside that checklist the option to, not option, but you give them the challenge to come up with the ideas, opposed to them following that checklist step by step by step. So you would reword the checklist to be, for example, do the research and let me know what this title for this new position may be if we decide to hire, and what the job duties would be. So you delegate a responsibility that ends in a result that they have to report back to you, opposed to them having step-by-step procedure and all they're doing is checking it off. Did that answer your question, Lee? Instead of delegating, giving people opportunity to grow, be challenged, shine, they take on work that easily can be done, accomplished by members of their team. Absolutely. Because when you let them determine what the ingredients is for the project, they're going to be more excited, opposed to you saying to them, this is X, Y, and Z that I need you to get done. You can still have those bullet points of the things that you're looking for, but don't checklist everything so that all they are doing is following it. If you have to micromanage a person, then of course you can do checklists. So I want you to be clear, as sometimes you will need a checklist depending on that individual. But if you have a person that's more of a leader than a person that doesn't need to have the checklist, then you appropriately do either one. If they're a good person that can be delegated to, then that's the process you follow. If you need them to be, they're not like a self-starter to the degree that you need them to be, you help them along with the checklist as a boss, so that they grow into that leadership role where you can now go from doing a checklist with them to delegating to them. That makes sense? Leaders earn respect. Look at this graphic here. I should show you what the other one looks like, but you see how funny that color is there? Like, this is the lady, she's a boss, and then the leader is the same woman. Do you know when I got this graphic, they changed a woman to a man? Can you believe that? And I just politely copied that thing right over and pasted that same woman over there. How dare you? She inspires fear, but a man earns respect. And he had a beard. He kind of looked like her, but he had a beard. So you knew it was a man. Anyway, we'll get past that. Leaders earn respect. An employee or a colleague or a client will respect you more if you show that you have that trust in them. Like I was taught in my 20s, you have to make people feel like you trust them. And I find that in my business that it's so important that people feel like they can trust you, or that you trust them to get the job done. And so I was always trying to look for people to work for me that I felt like I could leave the building and be gone for 2 days, maybe 2 weeks, and things would still go like I planned it, like I wanted it to go. And so in my hiring practice, I have probably had one of the most lengthy hiring practices ever, because I made you go through a lot of different, and this was because I had a diversity training consultant that was a great friend to me, and she was in charge of HR for one of the casinos. And she showed me a lot of the tips that the casinos use to weed out people that weren't going to be great in certain leadership roles. And so she shared with me her procedures and processes, and I actually rewrote them to fit my company. And so part of what my application package included was leadership skills. How would you, what decision would you make in this scenario? And so it's not all about, and I tell my clients now, it's not all about just hiring the person with the best resume, or even if you give them a task to do and they do a really good job, you got to go underneath and kind of dig into some of those soft areas to see just who that person is and what they're going to bring to the table. And if it's a management role that you're hiring for, what are their great boss aspects opposed to their leadership aspects? I don't want somebody working for me that's going to inspire fear in my employees. I don't want to be the guy, good guy, bad cop. I don't want my company being run like that. I want that person, anybody, to feel that they can walk up to my office at any time and come and see me about their issues and their concerns. And I'm going to take the time to listen. Although for like 15 years, I had a office manager. Even when my sister or my mother came to the building, I would get a phone call, Trina, they're on their way up the steps. And she was a great employee, but she took everything seriously, and she had a purpose for me. But you still want people to feel comfortable when they come to speak to you, and that you are so approachable, and so people feel like if they have something that they want to improve on or want you to give them advice on, they'll have that comfortability in talking to you, opposed to just saying I quit. I think I may have had like maybe 2 or 3 people quit work when I had regular employees that quit working for me. And I was able to let them know, just because I'm this nice person as a boss and a leader doesn't mean that I can't become a boss when you're doing something wrong. But I know how to do it. I think that's what, Molly, you zoomed in on a call that I had, or that a session that we were doing in the groups, probably when I first started this class, and we were talking about the irate customer versus the person was the troublemaker, opposed to the person that wasn't. And the way I told you I would have handled it, that came from experience, because you just try to figure out what's going to work best for both people, not just the person that's the troublemaker. Because if you win both of them over, then you can solve the problem. That's my take on it. Leaders don't use people, they develop them. And so a boss will use people to get where they're going, whereas a leader will develop people to get where the company is going, where the team is going. And for me, even though you have people that'll come on board at your business or on your job that will step on you to get anywhere they're going, obviously you have to keep your mindset focused on who you are. I think we talked to somebody today, and she said that this woman was a cubicle right over, and she came to work late all the time. You remember Michelle and Pam? We talked about that person that was late, coming in every day and didn't know, they didn't do their job. Well, they did their job, but they had some issues. So for me, if I have that situation with my staff, and I see that one person is using the other person to further themselves, I'm going to have a talk with them. I'm going to recognize what it is that they're doing. And I'm not going to call that person in by themselves. I'm going to call them both in. And I'm going to find out each individual's perspective. How do you feel about, and I'm not going to be specific to that situation I may have observed or that person may have told me. I'm going to get a generalized feel of just general information. And then I'm going to ease that situation into the conversation, just so that I am hoping that the person that's using the other person in the company is going to now all of a sudden be a little bit more aware, and their mindset may be different because the approach was different. Wasn't accusatory. It wasn't, you're in trouble. But just, how does that make you feel? Or how do you feel about that situation? And then ask the other person. And both have them feel like every response that they have are as equally as important to me as the boss or the leader. Because in that role, I'm actually in a leadership role, because I'm trying to get these two people to work better together, because I need them both. That strong, bossy person is somebody you may need in the company so that they can exercise those kinds of conversation pieces that may be needed in the company for an irate customer, where, they know how to handle themselves professionally, but they need to be a little more assertive. Whereas the leadership person may be a little more permissive and not be able to deal with, all kinds of controversy. So if you have that dynamic between your employees, you want to look at the strengths of each person and work on those strengths and the negatives to see if you can build a better employee, opposed to just getting rid of them or letting them continue to act on that bad behavior every single time there's a situation that comes up. Any questions? Absolutely. In the industry that we come from in New Jersey, it's 100% casino. And so when the casinos started to shut down, the population of employees thought they had no real skill sets to transfer over to a new potential job. And so I would always point out, number one, you got strong customer service skills because most of those jobs were dealer. They were dealing cards or dealing craps or whatever that gaming thing is. But in doing that, you were multitasking. You had strong customer service skills, and you were also leading the team because you're the person that they're concentrating on. So those leadership skills have to be documented in your on your resume. And so what I have my students do is we build a bio in the first week of the training. So it's going to be 4 to 5 pages. I want everything you've ever done since college. If you don't have a college degree and you worked in a casino straight from high school and stayed there for 20, 30 years, which a lot of people do, and where I teach my online classes, thank God. That's what they did. They graduated high school, went into the casino because you made more money. You can make so much money without any additional education. And of course, it was a booming area, so that's what they did. But I wanted to show them that you have so many skills from being in that position, and you have to document them, and you have to document them in a way that it shows up. And then on top of all of that, working in the casino, they would often train the employees on change management, time management. It was always some kind of training aspect that all the employees would have to go through so that they would keep them up on their skill set in terms of delivering to the customer and making that money with the casino games. And so they didn't often get certificates for those. So it doesn't matter if you have the certificates, but if you remember the training, outline on your bio those credentials that you got. Even if you don't remember the name, you know what the concept was. So you can write all of that down. So that's why I have my students build a bio. And then when you apply for the job that you're interested in, you pull out specific areas of your bio for that specific job. And you're not trying to figure out, well, okay, what did I do when? Because you already have that template as your bio. And then you just copy and paste what you need for that specific job description that you're applying for. Because we all know we don't use the same resume like we did 30 years ago. You get 100 copies made up, you're good for 10 years. Now you have to change that resume, the objective, all of it to fit the job you're applying for. Oh, so how I handle that is I let the person that has the problem go first. Because then you make them feel important. You make them feel more relaxed. They're not sitting there squirming in their seat while the person that you think is the victim, for lack of a better word, I can't think of, not the person that is not the problem child. If you go towards the problem child first, then they get empowered by being called on first. They calm down a little bit. They feel like they really have to articulate what they're saying so that not only do they get their point across, but they sound professional. They want to indicate that they're not this irate person that this other person is about to say they are. So putting them on the hot spot first, I think kind of diffuses the situation and keeps it in a lower key. And then you let the person who's having the problem, they feel empowered too because they get the last say and they can say exactly how they feel. And then as the mediator, then I will ask, well, how do you feel about what she said? How do you feel about what she said or he said? And then we talk about the differences of opinions and how, okay, well, what would be the solution from you? What would be the solution from you? And I learned that when I took training um, several years ago. I am a certified mediator for parenting programs. And in that, we had to do several scenarios of how to get the two parents to come together and be relaxed with trying to talk about the parenting plan without yelling and screaming. So they always taught us that you go to the first person with the biggest complaint, the one that filled out the paperwork and it's 20 pages opposed to the one that just signed it. They have the most to say, but you want to control that environment so that they don't go overboard as well. If the child wants proof of that training, what do you do then? Well, typically, if you don't have the certificate, you would just tell them that, it was ongoing under the upward mobility program in that job. And they didn't issue certificates, but they did, like give you credit for actually attendance. And then you could give them examples of scenarios of what you learned when you took the class or you took the workshop. And off the record, I'd make my own certificate up, but I didn't say that. Leaders say, let's go. And then bosses say, go do it, get it done. I used to have this guy that worked with me. It was with SCORE. He was, we were all volunteers. And he would just say, get her done to the people. He would do the presentation and he was always doing a presentation on how to write and publish your own books. And he would say, get her done. Just go get her done. And most of the females in the class would take offense to it. And then the males in the class would be like, well, you're here to help me figure out how to get it done. So don't send me to go get it done. Let's go get it done. And there was no change in his mind. He just was gonna. He said that for as long as he was volunteering for SCORE with our chapter, and I would just let him go. But people don't like to say just go do it. They don't like to hear just go do it. They like you to say, okay, let's figure this out. Like with my students, I always tell them at the end of the training, do not spend more than 10 minutes on something that I can solve by one phone call, one text, upwards of anywhere less than 2 minutes. If you spend more than 10 minutes, then you're not using your best resource, which is me. I created the curriculum. I know what I'm looking for. Why would you sit there for 20 minutes trying to figure something out that you can ask me and get the question and the answer done immediately? And so I always give that. Let's just, we're in this together in terms of you getting to the finish line. And what I want from you is to finish, and so do you. So let's do it together. Leaders take blame and give credit. Well, we all know how that goes, how that feels when a boss takes credit for what you do. But I found the underlying aspect of that. I really don't mind letting people take credit. It's sort of like my curriculum. Like I'll develop my curriculum for let's say Zoom. And when I develop my curriculum, half of it is going to be in my PowerPoint presentation, and the other half I'm going to ad lib. So I don't care if you take credit for it, my PowerPoint presentation, and then you try and go ad lib it. Somehow, some way, you're not going to understand what I meant, and it's not going to make sense. What you're saying is not going to match my PowerPoint. And so I tend to focus in on not so much worrying about somebody taking credit for what I've done, opposed to knowing that whatever is being done has been affected by other people, and they're taking it to the level that they need to take it to, and of course we'll ultimately share it with other people. And so you're not always going to be able to receive the credit that you deserve, but you certainly can, on the opposite side of that, give credit to people who deserve it, that you're in control over. So I always like to pretty much, and I always like to give positive feedback for anybody that I'm doing a Zoom call with, or my students, or I'm in conversation with. I always like to keep it positive. And I don't always feel when I say, oh, everything's gonna be fine, it's gonna work itself out. I don't always feel that way, but I say it anyway because it's not my interpretation of it, it's your interpretation of receiving what I said. And if you feel better, and I always attribute that to cancer. People walk around 10, 15 years with cancer. It doesn't start to eat them up until they find out they have it. Isn't that interesting? It compels itself. Poor example, horrible example. I'm a cancer victim as well, but I still use that because I want people to understand the depth of how and the power that you have over yourself and other people if you use it in the best way. And I think we're coming up on our last bullet. Leaders think long term and bosses think short term. Why? Because they're always trying to get ahead of everybody, and they're always trying to do what it is that they feel is in their best interest, opposed to a leader realizing that if you bring the whole team together, not only will you get more contracts, more opportunity, everybody will be working cohesively together. They will all be looking to meet that requirement at the end of whatever the project is. And when you have more people working together opposed to 2 or 3 people standing out on the sidelines, you're going to get better results. So I think that as a leader, anything that I do, I always look at the end result before I start. Even with my curriculums, before I start to build my curriculum, I write what I want the end result to be, and then I start to build towards it. When you do short term, then if something comes in and gives you a indicator that it's not going to work, then what do you do? Or you get sideswiped. What do? You got to figure something out real quick. But if you think about long term, then you're looking at all of the things that could possibly go wrong and what the solutions will be to those deflections or the things that may not work out as planned. So I always look at everything long term. Even when I go to the grocery store, even in this pandemic, I'm charting out my road. I'm not going to go back and forth down the highway, left, right, zigzag. I'm going to hit everything on the way and then on the way back so that I can have a smooth transition from going and coming. And I'm not wasting time. I'm not wasting gas. I'm not wasting money. I'm getting the long-term effect of what I need to get done. I'm going to be looking at the long-term effect opposed to that short-term of what I'm actually after for that day. I think. Oh, in closing, leaders are focused on people opposed to, let's move this out the way, opposed to a boss being focused on themselves, whereas a leader is focused on the colleagues, all the people that are on the team. So, like I said at the end, I wanted to, and actually we had that disruption and we're still closing out on time. That's wonderful. I'm going to put this in the chat so people can copy it. It is a quick quiz, and like I said, it will ask you, I think it's about 6 or 7 questions. It's not that long. You'll get an email that looks like this in your email because it'll ask for your email, and then you'll click on this link that says get your detailed report, and then it'll tell you whether or not you're a leader or a boss, and it'll give you tips on how to improve or information on whether, what it's like to be a leader or a boss depending on your circumstances. And so that would be your homework assignment. And then next week when I come back to do part 2, I'm going to talk about how you integrate all of these things that I went over in terms of the boss versus the leader. I'm going to show you the positive things that are in these bullets that I just did. It's 9 of them, I think. Yeah, 9. I'm going to show you how you turn those boss items into leadership. And so that you get a better team spirit with your team and you feel better about what you're doing as the leader. That's it. Any questions? No, crazy. Yeah. Okay, and I'll put the PowerPoint up as well so that everyone can look at it and be prepared for, or come up with ideas that they think, uh, if it's an attribute for a boss, how that can turn into something positive under the leadership category. That would be helpful too as homework. Sure. I have one micromanaging. When do you give the tips or edits to their work on a weekly basis without seeming like you're micromanaging? Um, do you have to do it on a weekly basis, Alyssa? Because if that person's taking that weekly interaction from you as micromanaging, then maybe you should do it every 2 weeks. What I usually do for my students or my employees is and this is true, when when I would write, before I would write the paychecks and do payroll, they all had to do their activity log. So they would have to write down everything that they accomplished for the week. And the reason I did that, because we're a school, it's sort of like a substitute teacher. Like, you had to keep your log of what you did with the students. So if you were out that next week, we would know exactly where you left off, what you covered, so that that substitute teacher could come in and fill in your space. I had no trouble with getting them to do that. But in a regular working environment, that may be, well, why do I have to do a task list? Well, I always tell my students to create that task list to cover your butt. So if you have an employee, a fellow employee that is trying to sabotage you, or you have a boss that's trying to sabotage you, and they say, oh, well, that person was sitting at the desk all day, not doing anything, and he doesn't deserve a raise, or, she needs to be written up. You pull out your task list. You got everything you did on that particular date. You got the date. You could even put the time and then a list of everything you did in that time period. And that just helps you. So I always teach my students, and I make them do it under Google Calendar now. We used to have a form that we had them fill out, but now to get them experience with using Google Calendar, I have them do their task, not task list, I call it their weekly report. They have to do their weekly report, and it's every day they will document what they did and what they accomplished. And it's great to take it to the workplace, because then you're covering yourself. If you're called into the office, well, why didn't you get this done, or why didn't you get that done? You can't remember. You're already sitting on a hot seat. But if you pull out your Google Calendar or your weekly report, well, the reason I couldn't get that done is because you had me doing this. And then, Tracy came over and asked me to stop what I was doing so I could get this done. And this is what I did between this time. So it works both ways. It's a great cover your butt tool, but it's also a way that you can, even for yourself, know what you've accomplished and what you need to do. Yes. You're going to complete that link. And I also am going to send you over the PowerPoint, or Molly will. And so each one of these items that are under the boss category, I want to have you guys come up with an idea as to how that could turn into a leadership opposed to a boss. The positive way you can do that. So, for example, instead of inspiring fear, you could talk to your team about the fact that we have this deadline, and we really are going to get bonuses, or we're going to be rewarded for getting this project done on time or ahead of time. And this is, something that we would love to be able to get for everybody in the office. And that way you're still inspiring them to get it done faster, but you're giving a reward at the end, opposed to, and having them be fearful if they don't get it done. Because now I'm going to work harder because I want that bonus, or I want whatever it is. Could be a gift card, could be $10 gift card. It could be something small, but turn that fear into, something that would make that person want to do it without feeling that they're in fear of losing their job or in fear of disappointing you. Because most people, when they work for somebody, they want to make that person proud of them. They want to make an impression on them, especially if you're working really hard and you care about your job. You want it's like your teacher when you're in school. You want your teacher to feel like you did your best. Most people want their boss to feel like they did their best. If they're a leader, if they're a good boss. If I'm not a good boss, I'm just gonna put my hours in. You're welcome. Okay, I will send it right over to you when we're done. And I so apologize to everybody about that power outage. Thank you. You too. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.